Never trust parents who say you need to be independent if they don't apply that rule to all their children. I'm Madison Cooper, and this is the story of how my parents destroyed our relationship with 3 words: you're on your own. But 9 years later, at my sister's wedding, when they called me a missing piece, my sister's fiancé turned pale and said something that changed everything. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was 18, fresh out of high school with a 3.8 GPA and dreams bigger than our small Ohio town. College acceptance letters were scattered across my desk. Ohio State, Miami University, even a partial scholarship to Case Western. I felt like my future was finally within reach. That Tuesday evening in May, Mom called me down for dinner. "Madison, we need to talk about college," she said, her voice carrying that tone I'd learned to dread. The same tone she used when she told me I couldn't go to prom because the dress was too expensive. I slid into my usual seat across from my 16-year-old sister Isabella, who was scrolling through her phone like she always did during family discussions. Dad cleared his throat and folded his hands on the table. "Madison, your mother and I have been discussing your future," he began. "We think it's time you learned to be independent." "Independent?" I repeated, confusion clouding my thoughts. "I mean, yeah, I want to be independent eventually, but college, we can't pay for your tuition," Mom interrupted, not even looking at me. "It's just not financially feasible." The words hit me like ice water. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline, the just kidding, anything to make this make sense. But their faces remained serious, almost resolved. But what about Isabella?" I stammered, glancing at my sister, who finally looked up from her phone. "When she goes to college—" "That's different," Dad said quickly. "Isabella has different potential, different needs, different potential." The phrase echoed in my mind as I watched Isabella smirk slightly before returning to her phone. At 16, she was already the golden child, the one whose B+ grades were celebrated while my A's were expected. The one who got the new iPhone, while I got lecture about gratitude when I asked for school supplies. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have good grades. I got scholarships. I just need help with the rest." "Madison, you're strong," Mum said, finally meeting my eyes. "You've always been the one who figures things out. Isabella needs more support." More support. The girl who'd never held a job, never had to save her own money for anything, never been told no to anything she wanted. I looked around that dinner table and saw the truth written in their faces. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about independence. This was about who they'd already decided was worth investing in. "You'll figure it out, honey," Dad added, cutting into his meatloaf. "You always do." That night, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling, I realized this moment was just the culmination of 18 years of being second place in my own family. When I was 12 and Isabella was 10, we both had birthdays in the same month. I got a set of books, educational ones, of course. Isabella got an iPhone 6, even though she was only 10. When I asked why, Mum said, "Books will help you grow. Isabella needs to stay connected with her friends." When I was 15 and came down with strep throat during Isabella's piano recital, they took me to urgent care, dropped me off with the nurse, and rushed back to hear Isabella play Für Elise. I sat in that sterile waiting room for 3 hours, texting them updates about my fever while they sent back pictures of Isabella taking her bow. When I was 17 and won a small academic scholarship for my essay on climate change, Dad said, "That's nice, honey," before turning to Isabella to celebrate her getting a B+ on a history test she'd studied for with a tutor they'd hired. But it was the conversation I wasn't supposed to hear that really opened my eyes. I was 17, home early from my part-time job at the local diner. I'd been saving every tip for college, every dollar earned smelling like grease and cleaning up after people who barely noticed I existed. I was walking upstairs when I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. Isabella is just so much smarter than Madison, Mum was saying. More intuitive, more socially aware. Madison works hard, but she's always been ordinary, Dad replied. Isabella has that spark, that thing that makes people successful. I've frozen on the stairs, my hand gripping the banister so tight my knuckles went white. We should really focus our resources on Isabella's future, Mum continued. Madison will find a way to get by. She always does. But Isabella needs our investment to reach her full potential. Exactly, Dad agreed. Madison is self-sufficient. Isabella needs guidance, support, opportunities. If we're smart about this, Isabella could really make something of herself. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, listening to them plan Isabella's bright future while dismissing mine like it was an afterthought, like I was an afterthought. That was the moment I understood my role in this family. I wasn't the daughter they were proud of. I wasn't the daughter they believed in. I was the reliable one, the one who didn't need anything, the one who would figure it out so they could focus on their real investment. Standing in my childhood bedroom after that dinner conversation about college, surrounded by participation trophies and honour roll certificates that had never seemed to matter, I made a decision. If they wanted me to be independent, I'd show them what independence really looked like. The next morning I walked into the kitchen where Isabella was eating cereal and scrolling through college prep websites for schools she wouldn't even apply to for 2 more years. Isabella, I said, sitting down across from her, can I ask you something? She looked up, surprised I was talking to her directly. We'd grown distant over the years, our relationship becoming more like polite strangers sharing a house. Sure, she said, though her tone suggested she'd rather keep browsing. Do you think it's fair that Mum and Dad won't help me with college, but they're already planning to pay for yours? She shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in her cereal. I don't know. No, they said you're stronger, more independent. Is that what you think? That I don't deserve help because I'm stronger? For a moment, just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been guilt, but then she shrugged. I don't know, Madison. Maybe they just think I'll need more help than you will. More help. Not different help, not equal help. More help, because she was worth more of their time, energy, and money. That afternoon, I called my guidance counsellor, Mrs. Peterson. She'd been encouraging about my college prospects all year, and I needed to hear from someone who believed in me. Madison, I'm so sorry to hear about your situation, she said after I explained. But you have options. Your grades and test scores qualify you for several need-based grants. And with your work experience, you could get a good part-time job near campus. It's just hard, I admitted, sitting in her office, surrounded by college brochures I could no longer afford to dream about. I don't understand why they think Isabella deserves more support than I do. Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, her expression serious. Madison, in my 20 years as a counsellor, I've seen a lot of family dynamics. Sometimes parents make decisions based on their own fears and biases rather than what's actually best for their children. But that doesn't define your worth or your potential. She was right, but it didn't make the pain less sharp. 2 weeks later, I made the decision that would change everything. I was sitting at the diner during my dinner break, watching families laugh together over shared meals. when my phone buzzed with a text from Mum. "Don't forget to clean your room this weekend. The Hendersons are coming over and Isabella wants to show them her college vision board." Isabella's college vision board. For schools she wouldn't apply to for 2 years. Schools they were already saving for. I texted back, "I won't be here this weekend." "Where are you going?" "To look at apartments." My phone rang immediately. "Madison, what are you talking about?" Mum's voice was sharp with irritation, not concern. "You want me to be independent?" I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "So I'm going to be independent. I'm moving out." "Madison, don't be dramatic. You can live at home and commute to community college." "No, Mum, I'm done being the family backup plan. I'm done being the kid who doesn't matter enough to invest in." "That's not..." "It is exactly that," I interrupted. "And you know what? You're right. I will figure it out, but I'll figure it out without you." I hung up and stared at my phone, waiting for it to ring again. It never did. 3 days later, I found a tiny studio apartment near the community college, barely more than a closet with a kitchenette. The deposit took most of my savings, but for the first time in 18 years, I was going to live somewhere I wasn't constantly reminded that I was second choice. The day I moved out, Isabella sat on her bed, watching me pack my 2 suitcases. Mum and Dad were at work, or pretending to be. "Madison," Isabella said quietly as I folded my last sweater, "I didn't know they were going to say no to helping you." I paused, looking at my little sister. For a moment she looked younger than 16, uncertain in a way I'd never seen before. "Would it have mattered if you had known?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time, then, barely above a whisper, "I don't know." That was the last real conversation we had for 9 years. Living on my own was harder than I'd imagined, but easier than staying would have been. I worked full-time at the diner while taking classes at community college. Every dollar was accounted for, every decision weighed against my budget. I ate ramen for dinner, more nights than I care to remember, wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, and studied in the library because I couldn't afford to heat my apartment properly. But I was free from the constant reminder that I wasn't good enough, smart enough, special enough to deserve my parents' investment. Free from watching Isabella receive everything I'd been denied while being told I should be grateful for the opportunity to struggle. I transferred to Ohio State after 2 years, working in the campus bookstore and tutoring other students to pay my bills. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing, no debt, and no family in the audience to watch me walk across that stage. But I walked anyway, for me. After graduation, I landed an entry-level marketing position at a small tech company in Columbus. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd earned it. Every late night, every missed meal, every moment of doubt that whispered, maybe my parents had been right about my potential. The years blurred together in a pattern of work, growth, and careful distance from my family. I sent birthday cards and Christmas texts, received brief responses that felt more like obligation than affection. I heard through the grapevine that Isabella had indeed received full parental support through college. A private liberal arts school, sorority fees, spring break trips. The whole experience I'd been told we couldn't afford. She graduated with a degree in art history and a part-time job at a boutique. No judgment, everyone's path is different. But the contrast wasn't lost on me. 5 years into my career, I was promoted to marketing manager. 7 years in, I was leading campaigns for major clients and earning more than my father ever had. 8 years in, I bought my first house, a small but beautiful craftsman bungalow with a garden I tended on weekends. I built a life, a good life, a life surrounded by friends who chose me, not family who tolerated me. And then 9 years after I'd walked out of my childhood home, I received an email that would force me to confront everything I'd tried to leave behind. "You're invited to Isabella's wedding," the subject line read. "Not your sister's wedding or our daughter's wedding. Just Isabella's wedding." As if I were a distant acquaintance rather than family. I stared at that invitation for 3 days before opening it. Elegant script on cream-coloured paper announcing Isabella's engagement to James Mitchell. The wedding would be in Columbus, practically in my backyard. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend I'd never seen it, continue the quiet life I'd built. But another part of me, the part that had worked so hard to prove my worth, wanted to go. Not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to close this chapter once and for all. I RSVP'd yes, and immediately regretted it, then unregretted it, then regretted it again. But as the date approached, I realised something important. I wasn't the 18-year-old girl who'd left home with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. I was a successful professional who'd built a life on her own terms. I didn't need their approval anymore, but maybe I needed to see them see who I'd become, not for them, for me. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of my mirror, trying on the dress I'd bought for the occasion, a sophisticated navy blue dress that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. My reflection looked confident, successful, happy. I looked like someone worth investing in. Tomorrow I would walk into that wedding as Madison Cooper, marketing manager, homeowner, woman who'd proven everyone wrong. Not as the unwanted daughter, not as the missing piece, but as myself. It was time to show them exactly what they'd given up when they decided I wasn't worth their bet. The wedding venue was everything I'd expected. Elegant, expensive, and exactly the kind of event my parents would spare no expense for when it came to Isabella. The riverside gardens had been transformed into a fairy tale setting with white roses, twinkling lights, and enough floral arrangements to fund a semester at Ohio State. I walked through the entrance wearing my navy dress and the confidence I'd spent 9 years building. But nothing could have prepared me for how invisible I'd feel the moment I stepped inside. The reception area buzzed with relatives I barely recognised, family friends who'd watched me grow up, and colleagues of my parents who knew Isabella as the successful daughter. I watched from the edges as people congratulated my parents on what a beautiful bride and such an accomplished young woman. Nobody mentioned the other daughter. I found my assigned seat, table 12, near the back, between a +1 who didn't know anyone and an elderly aunt who spent most of the ceremony asking where I'd been for the past 9 years. When I tried to explain, she waved me off with, "Oh, you young people and your independence phases." Independence phases. As if choosing to survive without support was just a rebellious teen moment that I'd grown out of. During the ceremony, I watched Isabella float down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my first year's rent. She looked beautiful, genuinely happy, and for a moment I felt something that might have been sisterly pride. Then I saw my parents in the front row, beaming with the kind of joy I'd never seen them direct toward anything I'd accomplished. James Mitchell, the groom, was tall, confident, and carried himself like someone accustomed to success. When he saw Isabella walking toward him, his face lit up with pure adoration. At least someone in this family knew how to recognize value when they saw it. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional, expensive, and everything a parent dreams of giving their daughter. I sat there calculating what my parents had spent. The venue, the flowers, Isabella's dress, the photographer. Easily $30,000. Enough to have paid for my entire first year of college with money left over. But I pushed that thought away. I wasn't here to be bitter. I was here to prove to myself that I'd moved beyond needing their validation. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I found myself gravitating toward the bar. Not to drink away my feelings, but because it was the only place where I could stand without someone asking why I looked familiar or where I'd been hiding. That's when I overheard the conversation that reminded me exactly why I'd left. "Madison looks well," said Mrs. Henderson, our old neighbour who'd known me since I was 5. "Oh, yes," Mum replied, her voice carrying that polite tone she used when discussing inconvenient topics. "She's been finding her way." "I heard she has a good job in marketing," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Corporate work, right? Must be doing well for herself." There was a pause, and I leaned closer to the pillar I was hiding behind. "Well, you know Madison," Dad chimed in. "She was always good at making things look better than they were." It's a useful skill in marketing, I suppose. Making things look better than they were, as if my success was just clever packaging rather than years of hard work and sacrifice. Isabella, though, Mum's voice brightened considerably. "Isabella has real talent, artistic vision. He's been helping design the marketing materials for some boutique downtown. Very creative work." I felt that familiar knot form in my stomach, the same one I'd carried for 18 years before finally walking away. Even now, even at Isabella's own wedding, they couldn't acknowledge my achievements without diminishing them and elevating hers. I was contemplating a quiet exit when the reception began and we were called to take our seats for dinner. Table 12 was even worse than I'd imagined, far enough from the family table that I might as well have been a stranger, close enough to hear the speeches about Isabella's wonderful parents and supportive family. The best man talked about James and Isabella's love story. The maid of honour gushed about Isabella's kindness and creativity. Dad gave a speech about being proud of the woman Isabella had become and the bright future ahead of her. Nobody mentioned that she had a sister. I was picking up my chicken and contemplating the earliest polite exit time when the evening took a turn I never could have anticipated. It started when Mom and Dad approached my table during the father-daughter dance. I'd been watching Isabella and Dad spin around the dance floor, remembering how he'd taught me the same steps in our living room when I was 8, before I became the disappointment. "Madison," Mum said, sliding into the empty chair next to me. Her voice carried that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "We haven't had a chance to talk." Dad sat down across from me, his expression unreadable. For a moment we sat in awkward silence while the music played and other families celebrated together. "You look successful," Dad said finally, as if success was something that could be worn like jewellery. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I am successful." "That's wonderful, dear," Mum said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We always knew you'd figure things out." There it was, again, that phrase that had haunted me for 9 years, "You'll figure it out," as if struggling alone was a feature, not a bug. "Yes," I said carefully, "I did figure it out, all of it, completely on my own." The emphasis wasn't lost on them. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Madison, we should talk about what? I interrupted, surprised by my own directness. About how you told an 18-year-old girl that her sister deserved financial support for college, but she didn't. About how you made it clear that Isabella was the investment and I was the liability. That's not how Mum started. It's exactly how it was, I said, my voice calm but firm. And you know what? You were right about one thing. I did figure it out. I figured out that I'm worth more than being someone's backup plan. The song ended, and the dance floor filled with other couples. Isabella and James were laughing about something, lost in their bubble of happiness. Good for them, really. Dad leaned forward, his voice low. Madison, what's done is done. Can't we just what? I asked. Pretend it didn't happen. Pretend that you didn't choose one daughter over the other. Pretend that I didn't spend 9 years building a life while you invested everything in Isabella's future. You turned out fine, Mom said, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. You're successful. You're independent. I turned out fine despite you, not because of you, I said quietly. There's a difference. The conversation was interrupted by the DJ asking for everyone's attention for the father-daughter dance with the bride's family. I watched as Dad excused himself to dance with Isabella again, leaving Mom and me sitting in uncomfortable silence. Madison, Mum said after a long pause, what do you want from us? It was such a loaded question. What did I want? An apology? Recognition? An acknowledgement that they'd made a choice that damaged our relationship permanently? I don't want anything from you anymore, Mom, I said, and I realised it was true. I stopped wanting anything from you the day I moved out. Then why are you here? Good question. Why was I here? Closure, I guess, I said, watching Isabella laugh with her new husband. I needed to see if you'd changed, if maybe you'd realised what you'd lost when you decided I wasn't worth your investment. And you haven't. You still see Isabella as the daughter worth celebrating, and me as the one who just figured it out. Nothing's changed, except that I don't need your approval anymore. Mum was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice that tried to sound casual, but came out strained. You know, Madison, some people might see your attitude as ungrateful. We raised you, fed you, gave you a home. Until you decided I should figure out everything else on my own, I finished. Yes, you did the bare minimum that parents are legally required to do. Congratulations. The conversation was becoming more heated than I'd intended. And I could see people at nearby tables starting to notice. This wasn't how I wanted this to go. I'd come here to prove to myself that I'd moved beyond their ability to hurt me, not to create a scene at Isabella's wedding. I was about to excuse myself when the evening took an unexpected turn. The DJ had just announced the cake cutting when James Mitchell appeared at our table, slightly out of breath and looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Excuse me," he said to my parents, "I need to borrow Madison for a moment." Before anyone could respond, he gently took my arm and guided me away from the table toward a quieter corner of the reception hall. I was confused, but followed, grateful for the rescue from an increasingly uncomfortable conversation. "I'm sorry," I said as we walked. "I hope I haven't caused any drama for Isabella's wedding. I was just—" "Madison Cooper," he said, stopping suddenly and turning to face me. "You're Madison Cooper from Tech Advanced Marketing." I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, that's—" "How do you know that?" His expression shifted from recognition to something that looked almost like awe. "You led the campaign for Morrison, Klein and Associates, the rebranding project that increased their client acquisition by 40%. Now I was completely confused. Yes, that was my team's project. I'm James Mitchell, senior partner at Morrison, Klein and Associates, he said, extending his hand formally. You probably worked with our junior partners, but I've been following your work for months. Your campaign strategy was brilliant. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Isabella's new husband was James Mitchell, senior partner James Mitchell, the James Mitchell whose firm had become one of our biggest clients, whose approval had led to my promotion to senior marketing manager just 3 months ago. Wow, I managed. Small world. Madison, I've been trying to get a meeting with you for weeks, he continued, his excitement growing. Your approach to the Morrison campaign was exactly what we needed. Professional, innovative, results-driven. I wanted to discuss expanding our partnership, maybe bringing you in for our other ventures. I stood there, processing this information, while music and laughter swirled around us. James Mitchell, the man who just married my sister, was one of the most respected lawyers in Columbus. His firm was known for representing high-profile clients and major corporations, and he'd been trying to meet with me. James, I said slowly, does Isabella know what I do for work? His expression shifted, becoming more serious. She mentioned you work in marketing, but honestly, we've been so focused on wedding planning, I never made the connection until I saw you tonight. He paused, studying my face. Why? Is there something I should know? Before I could answer, we were interrupted by a commotion near my table. I turned to see my parents standing with Isabella, who looked flustered and was glancing around the room. There you are, Isabella called out as she spotted us. James, what are you doing? People are looking for you for the cake cutting. In a minute, babe, James said, still looking at me with professional interest. I was just talking to your sister about her work. Isabella, did you know Madison runs marketing campaigns for major law firms? She's the one behind our most successful client acquisition strategy this year. Isabella's expression shifted from confusion to something I couldn't quite read. Oh, No, I didn't know that. Madison, James continued, turning back to me, I'd love to set up a proper meeting next week. We're expanding into corporate consulting, and I think your expertise could be... James, Isabella interrupted, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Can we please do this later? It's our wedding reception. Of course, you're right, James said, but he handed me his business card anyway. Madison, please call my office Monday. I think we have a lot to discuss. As they walked back toward the cake table, I heard Isabella's hushed voice. James, you don't understand. Madison and our family, it's complicated. Complicated how? His voice faded as they moved away, but I caught Isabella's response. She's been difficult since college, always trying to prove something. As if my success was motivated by spite rather than determination. I looked down at the business card in my hand. James Mitchell, senior partner, Morrison, Klein and Associates. The same firm that had given me my biggest professional breakthrough. The same man who'd just married my sister, while having no idea that the difficult family member was someone he'd been actively trying to recruit. The irony was almost too perfect. I was contemplating this twist of fate when my parents appeared beside me again, their expressions tighter than before. Madison, Dad said in a low voice. What was that about? What was what about? I asked, genuinely confused by their tone. Don't play dumb, Mum said, her polite facade finally slipping. What are you trying to pull with James? Pull with James, I repeated. I'm not trying to pull anything. I didn't even know who he was until 5 minutes ago. Right, Dad said sarcastically. You just happen to be working with Isabella's fiancé's company. What a coincidence. The accusation hit me like a slap. They thought I'd somehow manipulated this situation, that my professional success was some kind of scheme to insert myself into Isabella's life. Are you seriously suggesting that I orchestrated my career around Isabella's love life? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Do you honestly think I'm that petty? We don't know what to think anymore, Mum said. You show up here after 9 years of barely speaking to us, and suddenly you're working with James's firm? It's suspicious, Madison. Suspicious, I repeated slowly. My professional success is suspicious to you. Your timing is suspicious, Dad clarified. Why now? Why this? I stared at them, these people who'd raised me for 18 years, but clearly didn't know me at all. They were so used to seeing me as the problem child, the difficult one, the one who didn't deserve their investment, that they couldn't even conceive of me succeeding legitimately. You want to know why now? I asked, my voice calm but carrying an edge I'd never used with them before. Because James Mitchell's firm hired my company based on our reputation and results. Because I've spent 9 years building a career that has nothing to do with any of you. Because, despite your complete lack of faith in me, I became exactly the kind of professional you claimed Isabella had the potential to be. Madison, Mum started. No, I interrupted. You don't get to make my success about you. You don't get to turn my achievements into some kind of family conspiracy. I didn't even know Isabella was engaged to James until I got the wedding invitation. Then why come to the wedding at all? Dad demanded. If you're so successful and independent, why are you here? It was a fair question, and for a moment I didn't have an answer. Why was I here? What had I hoped to accomplish? Because I wanted to see if you'd changed, I said finally. I wanted to see if maybe, after 9 years, you might look at me and see someone worth being proud of, someone whose achievements matter, someone who deserved the same support you gave Isabella. And, Mum asked, and you haven't changed at all, I said, feeling something settle into place inside me. You still can't see my success without looking for an ulterior motive. You still can't acknowledge my achievements without diminishing them. You still see me as the problem rather than the solution. The cake cutting had begun, and people were gathering around Isabella and James as they posed for photos. I watched my sister smile for the cameras, radiant in her happiness, completely unaware that her new husband had just unknowingly validated everything I'd worked for. Madison, Dad said, his voice softer now, we never meant... Yes, you did, I said. And there was no anger in my voice anymore, just certainty. You meant every choice you made. You meant to invest in Isabella and not in me. You meant to support her dreams and dismiss mine. You meant to make it clear that she was worth your money and I wasn't. That's not... It is exactly that, I said. And you know what? It's fine. Because you were wrong about who I could become, and I was right about who I needed to be. I looked around the reception, at the expensive decorations, the professional photographer, the catered dinner, all the things that could have paid for my education. Then I looked at my parents, these people who'd given Isabella every advantage while telling me to figure it out alone. Thank you, I said suddenly. Thank you. Mom looked confused. "Thank you for making me independent," I said. "Thank you for forcing me to build my own life. Thank you for teaching me that I can't depend on anyone but myself." It was a hard lesson, but it was the right one. "Madison, I'm going to go now," I said, pulling my car keys from my purse. "I'm going to go home to the house I bought with money I earned at the job I got through skills I developed while you were investing in Isabella's potential." I started to walk away, then turned back. "And on Monday, I'm going to call James Mitchell's office and accept whatever opportunity he wants to offer me. Not because I'm trying to insert myself into Isabella's life, but because I'm good at what I do. Good enough that one of the most successful law firms in Columbus wants to work with me." "This missing piece," Dad said suddenly, his voice bitter. "Why is this missing piece even here?" The words stopped me cold. Missing piece. After everything, after seeing my professional success acknowledged by someone he respected, after 9 years of me building a life that should have made any parent proud, he still saw me as something that didn't belong. I turned around slowly, and for the first time all evening I smiled. "I'm not a missing piece, Dad," I said. "I'm a piece that never fit in your puzzle, but that doesn't make me broken. It just means I belong somewhere else." As I walked toward the exit, I heard James's voice calling my name. I turned to see him approaching quickly, with Isabella trailing behind, looking concerned. "Madison, wait," he said, slightly out of breath. "I hope I didn't cause any family drama back there. Isabella just told me there's some history." "No drama," I said, glancing at Isabella, who was avoiding eye contact. "Just clarity." "Good," James said, relief evident in his voice. "Because I meant what I said about working together. Your campaign for our firm was exceptional, and I'd hate for personal matters to interfere with a professional opportunity." I looked at this man who'd just married my sister, this successful lawyer who saw value in my work without knowing our family dynamics, who'd spent months trying to meet with me while having no idea I existed in Isabella's life. "It won't interfere," I said. "My professional life and my family life exist in completely separate worlds. They always have." "Excellent," James said. "I'll have my assistant call you Monday to set up a meeting." "James," Isabella said quietly, tugging on his arm, "people are looking for us." "Of course, you're right," he said, then turned back to me. "Madison, congratulations on your success. However you built your career, you should be proud. Your work speaks for itself." Your work speaks for itself. As I walked to my car, those words echoed in my mind. My work spoke for itself. My success spoke for itself. My life spoke for itself. I didn't need my parents to finally see my worth. I didn't need their validation or their investment or their pride. I had built something that stood on its own merit, something that impressed people who didn't know I was the difficult daughter or the missing piece. Driving home through the Columbus streets I'd learned to navigate on my own, I realized I'd gotten what I came for. Not reconciliation, not acknowledgement, not even closure in the traditional sense. I'd gotten proof that I was right to leave, right to build my own life, right to invest in myself when no one else would. And on Monday, I would walk into James Mitchell's office, not as Isabella's sister, but as Madison Cooper, marketing director, the woman whose work spoke for itself. For the first time in 9 years, I felt completely, genuinely free.